You're listening to the Super Power You podcast. This is episode 47.
Welcome to the Super Power You podcast, where we reveal the mental models and tactical skills needed to activate your inner superhero. And here's your host, Lisa Betts-Lacroix.
Hello, my lovelies. Thank you for being here on the Super Power You podcast. As always, I'm so happy that you are here and so appreciative. Last week, I gave you not one, but 5 podcast recommendations. And today I'm going to reiterate just one of them. Orion's show, the Stellar Life podcast, in which she interviews Sheila Kelly about Sheila's work and development of the S Factor. I'm making this recommendation again for anyone who, after listening to today's conversation with my guest Bernadette Pleasant, finds themselves wondering about the S Factor, which we talk about in our conversation and which was just one of the many forms and experiences that inspired Bernadette to create her own unique body of work. So if you're interested in that, go back. I'll link to Orion's show, the Stellar Life podcast, interviewing Sheila Kelly. It is hard to believe, but in just 1 month's time, we'll be publishing episode number 50. And that date, November 15th, will mark the 1-year anniversary of the Super Power You podcast. Now, a 1-year anniversary definitely calls for a celebration. And so I thought that I would do a little giveaway. The giveaway will be a Super Power You t-shirt, an Amazon gift card for $50, one for each episode, and a What's Your Superpower coaching call with me. So in trying to figure out which listener should win, I thought I'd put out a challenge which will help the sustainability and growth for the year 2 of the show. So all you have to do is enter an honest review on the Facebook page or on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, or any podcast platform, and then just send me an email at hey@lisabl.com and let me know that you reviewed, and then I'll enter you into the giveaway. So reviewing on the Facebook Superpower You page is probably the easiest. Just go there, click on the review section on the right, and give me your honest thoughts. And now let's jump into our interview. The importance of my conversation with my amazing guest today is, well, it's important for anyone who's experienced the feeling that they should, on some level, hold themselves back. So if you've ever had the feeling that you were too much, and I talked about this on Facebook not too long ago, how common it is for us to feel that we're too much, too energetic, too enthusiastic, too sexy, too present, too loud, too on and on and on. So many people posted their too muches on that Facebook post. But if you've ever had the inclination to make yourself smaller in any way, in spite of knowing that you really wanted to show up in a much bigger way, this episode, this conversation is for you, because my guest today will inspire you to step into your biggest, your boldest self, regardless of any past shame or circumstances, message you've received to the contrary. Now, this message is a reminder to all of us that it's time for us to show up big and to live out loud. As is the case with so many of my conversations, the things we discuss today apply to everyone, but as is often the case, I suspect the topic will resonate especially with the feminine in terms of women and the feminine in all of us. So now let's jump right in and meet my guest. My guest today is the essence of intoxicating and energetic. She is a personality. She travels globally, empowering others through classes, private workshops, retreats, and conference engagements informed by her experience in the Nia technique, pole dance, somatic healing, Reiki, and integrated energy therapy, as well as African, tribal, and free dance. Her work facilitates transformation for those who desire to live out loud and offers emotional freedom through movement and storytelling. She is a fiery, sensual speaker, a somatic healer, and the creator of Femme, a mind-body wellness program. I want to welcome you to the Superpower You podcast, Bernadette Pleasant.
It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm just so excited to talk with you. After meeting you at Casey Baker's festival, and after seeing you speak and dance and lead your workshops and just get to interact with you and your energy and your presence, I just knew I wanted to at some point get a chance to talk with you more in depth.
It is such a pleasure to share this work and this time with you right now, Lisa.
So I always start my conversations with people asking if they'd be willing to share something about their childhood or their first family or something about their early years that they think informs who they are and who they've become on this journey, in this path.
What a great question. My childhood, the first thought that comes to mind is, oh, do I want to go there?
When I first saw you speak, you shared a story, a beautiful piece of work. And now I'm speaking about your center stage talk at the Women Speak Festival.
Yes.
And I wonder if you would share that story.
That share during that talk it was so honest and so vulnerable, and it truly has impacted who I am today, of course, but the work that I've created as a result of it. That particular story, I'd run for class president against the class bully, the most feared girl in high school and the most popular mega personality that permeated the entire school. I was very proud of myself for stepping forward to do this. I wasn't shy, but I certainly wasn't someone who would run for such a position, but some friends had put me up to a dare. We were sitting in the auditorium. It was the day that they were going to make the announcement, and I was so nervous. I was sitting there trying to prepare myself to lose because there was no other option. In my mind, there was no other way. And everyone knew it and expected this. And she was sitting sort of off to the right in my periphery, and I could see her and her group of friends waiting for the moment. And I always think of the contrast, me sitting there nervous and attempting to prepare myself to look happy for her. And she's practically running up to get the certificate. And when the announcement was read, you could hear a pin drop because they announced my name. And there was a gasp from her and her group, but there was also a gasp in my body. I was all the things. I was nervous. I was excited. I was worried. I was worried I was going to get my ass kicked, quite honestly, because, that was very possible. But there was a celebration in me that I was trying to tamp down because how did this happen? And I got to the podium and I read the certificate and I saw my name and tears were running out of my eyes. I was just so excited to have won. It was this sort of convergence of emotions. My hands were trembling. I wanted to dance. I just wanted to scream and I was excited. And it was like, how could this happen? And I remember all that energy in my body. I walked off the stage and I did this happy dance and I ran out the auditorium because there was so much energy and that I just wanted to get home. I wanted to go someplace where I could celebrate, and I ran excited and joyous. I was also looking over my shoulder to make sure I wasn't being chased. And, it was just all this wonderful collision. It was everything. And it was so exciting. But I remember turning onto my street and we had this emerald colored greenhouse. Grabbed my key. And just as I was about to open the door to tell my mom, look what happened, I suddenly was very aware that I wasn't sure I could go and share the joy here either. My mom, she did the best she could, but she was torn. In hindsight, I could see that she wasn't happy. There was a bit of depression, and I remember doing this emotional calculation, like, is it okay for me to go into this house this happy? Will it be received? Will I be celebrated? Will she be happy for me? And I knew the moment I opened the door, I would know because she often sat in this room facing a window. And there she was when I opened the door in that familiar seat, looking out the window. And I knew there was no place for my happiness, for all of this joy and excitement that I so wanted to share, that she couldn't receive it. And I just noticed this folding myself, turning the light down to fit in somehow. She didn't turn her gaze off the window and she said, "How was your day?" I just shrugged and said it was okay. And it was everything but okay. It was exciting. It was wonderful. It was exquisite. And I couldn't share that, didn't share that because I knew she wouldn't receive it.
Yeah. So that's the perfect story to talk about the next thing that I want to discuss, which is something I've been thinking about a lot, just about how common it is for us to hold ourselves back because we feel like we are too much.
Yes.
And I know that's something that you've talked about. I mean, that was the central theme of that talk. And you are an enormous, beautiful personality, and you light up a room and you just have so much presence. And I'm really interested in your journey from it was fine and feeling like there was no space for your too much, and how you've come to be someone who writes something like, I'm quoting you, this is a beautiful time for us as women to use our voices, take up massive amounts of space, and surround ourselves with people and experience that celebrate our truth. So talk a little bit more about that journey of how you got from one place to the next.
I got from one place to the next very, very slowly, and with a whole lot of wanting to expand, to spread, and to not hold back. I realized I admired the people who my mom for sure, but certainly other people. I grew up in a very conservative religion, and people who were big and bold, folks who were considered certainly too much, wild, worldly. There were always negative things about them. And I was supposed to agree with the judgments, but quite honestly, very secretively, I admired them because they just spread their wings and they weren't trying to act within that narrow margin of emotion that is so acceptable by society. And so I just started to notice that that's what I wanted to do more of. And so I test the waters here and there, and it shows up in every way. It shows up in the way we use our voices, the way we move our bodies and dance, like what is considered too much. And I realized the things that were too much were truly the places that, quite honestly, I felt most comfortable. I felt most comfortable here. And as I started exercising that muscle of paying less attention to those who couldn't handle the light, the expansiveness, the bigness of me, taking less attention off of them and turning that inward and saying, but this feels good to me. I realized that I couldn't contain this feeling inside. I wanted to let it spread, and that it was good. There was this mental constraint about being too much and shaming it. I let that start to thaw, and it takes work to do that. I would soften those edges and take more risks and chances and speak up more, or be willing to just get in line first if there was a buffet because I was hungry, or it happens in little ways. These are not really big gestures. Or, the music comes on and I don't have to wait till the floor is pretty full or until I've had enough drinks to get up. Just the fact that I wanted to dance, giving myself permission to do that. So these are not necessarily big ways, but they feel like a risk or a dare initially until it just feels good.
Well, I love that you talk about your work, but also it sounds like this process and how you embrace the world in general as a healing.
Yes.
And it's almost like a healing from those limiting beliefs of too much.
Yes.
And not enough space.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It certainly started with my need to do this, my need to feel better and to not let others' judgments keep me constricted. And what starts to happen when I started to do that, I started to look around, and as I healed or gave more allowance for myself around this, what I would do is take another's hand or say, hey, how about this is for you too? And offering suggestions as to ways that I can create more space for them to spread their wings a bit. And that felt so good. Just giving them a container where they could spread their wings. I wanted to continue on my path, creating wider spaces, carving out wider I wanted wider circles, but as I was just thinking, no, it's more like canyons now. It just keeps widening and widening. And the more I create that for myself, it just keeps getting bigger, and another helps another. And that's how this is done.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the power of, I think, the feminine approach to healing and presence and expression and community.
Yes, indeed.
let's go to dance. I find movement to be necessary to my healing, to my joy, to my fun, just to connecting with myself.
Yes.
And so maybe talk a little bit about your past and how movement came to be the center of the healing work that you're doing with other people now.
Movement is essential for me. It always has been. I loved to dance as a child, and this wasn't any formal training dance. I just put music on and I was moving and dancing. I loved to do it. I grew up in a household of gifted people with voice and instrument, movers, dancers, and so this was everywhere. I went through a period of time as a child, though, where I was molested by my stepfather, and I shut down. I shut down. When my mom became aware of this, there was a disconnect with her and I. It was really sad that happened, but there was a shift in our dealings. And that dancing child that used to just love to move around the house, she never said, don't dance. But what I saw in her eyes was, that's too much. Shut that down. Mm-hmm. And I became guarded. I became ashamed of my body and the movement that felt so good and right to me. And I shut down, and I really feel like my hips were girdled energetically. I felt ashamed to move, and I wasn't even aware of it. I just knew that because there's joy in my body or I liked the song, suddenly there was a cage around that movement. And so there became a disconnect with it, and I didn't enjoy it for a while. I didn't realize how long, but I still enjoyed dancing, but I needed those things. I needed the dance floor to be full, or I needed, a few cocktails. I needed something to get out of my head and stop judging the movement. Mm-hmm. I recall stepping into an S-Factor classroom, and I walked into that room, and the beauty of those rooms. It was actually my 45th birthday party gift to myself was to take a group of friends to this class that I'd heard about. And I watched this instructor in the middle of the room, and she started to move her hips really wide and far and with abandon. And I realized while physically I was in really great shape and I loved to dance, I wanted to do that too. I realized somewhere I was shut down. I was holding back from what I was physically capable of doing because there was shame that was built in. And so I wasn't moving in the way that I desired to and could, because my love for movement and dance had been covered over. It had some constraints on it that I didn't know were there.
My heart breaks for you and for any child who has the experience of molestation that you experienced. And it's not only those kind of experiences, I think, that shut us down as women. It makes so much sense that your hips would feel locked up and that you would feel a kind of withholding of that freedom and full expression of yourself. But it doesn't necessarily only happen to people who have that extreme.
Absolutely.
It's actually quite amazing to me how extensive it is that we as women are inclined to feel like we have to hold ourselves back in that way.
Yeah. And this can happen any way there's been a shutdown.
Yes.
In one of my workshops, we talk about this, and someone shared that she has had a boyfriend. They would go out dancing, and he said, "You dance too wild." And she became self-conscious of the way she danced. So someone planted a seed that her expression was too much for them or too big for them. And so she then started to curtail her movement to make this person, this boyfriend, feel more comfortable. So she guards her hips. She girdles her hips. I recall another one sharing, she was a full-bodied woman, but someone had planted in her mind that beautiful expression happens for thin people. So, wherever the shame is dropped into your body, however that happens, it could be through physical, as in my case, or just someone saying that your body is too big. I mean, what is that? But the point is, it's how we receive it, how we perceive what's been said, and then what we do to accommodate what someone else needs. For me, it was that look that I would get from my mom to reel that in. There's a plethora of ways that happens.
So in your work, you create a safe space for all ages and backgrounds and body types.
Absolutely.
And dance skills to explore their sensual selves. How do you go about doing that? What's the basis for that foundation?
I pour so much love into that space. I always want my classroom, the experience that I create, to feel like a womb where someone just gets to be. It is my desire that a person can just come in or fall into that space. I often think of that feeling of what is it like to feel so held, have so much trust in another that you could close your eyes and fall backwards and just know they got you. That's
nice.
what I want. And it's that creation that comes from, this is what I wanted. This is what I wanted. And so it is imperative to me to create that space.
You mentioned S Factor a few minutes ago. They do a very nice job of creating a space that has that sort of womb-like safe environment for people, where the emphasis can be on our inner experience rather than on what we look like, without having mirrors, with the lights being dimmed. And so it sounds like maybe your experience has some elements of the same kind of physical.
Well, yes, that was definitely a space where I did not feel judgment. I felt safe. Favorite parts of class was the warm-up. And I love that. Pole dancing's not going to be for everybody.
Yeah.
I adore it. I was a student for 8 years, and my creation of this, what was an impetus for creating my body of work, was that I want to stay present to the moment. The intentional healing, it's done really subtly. Music is such medicine. It speaks to every nuance of emotion that can be had. What I needed was live music. So drums, which is a very big part of my work, my classes are done with live drums. The reason for the live drums is that they are in the present moment with you. So as you are moving and evolving in that moment, they are responding to your body's movement. I often refer to my drummers as co-teachers, and they are. They are such healers, and they watch with such intention and love. They are creating a deeper container for expression and healing.
That's beautiful.
Everywhere I teach, you'll always see the live drums. And it is not just any drummer. I need the conversations, the understanding that comes from these healers. I just came back from a retreat this weekend, and I often speak to new drummers. I explain what is necessary. We spend much time together in preparation, because often the drummers are men, and that is perfect, because when they are healers, their approach to beating that drum for you is actually in the feminine. They refer to the drum as the feminine. Their respect for that drum is like their respect for their mothers. My classes are predominantly women, while men are welcome, and more men are starting to come to the work, which is fantastic. But when we go through the emotional tour, I see my drummers looking so joyous. I've seen tears just run down their eyes when I am encouraging the classroom to move to grief. They have to feel it to play it. That's the container we created.
So I'm really fascinated by and really enjoying the idea of the drummers expressing from the feminine. Can you say a little bit more about that? Because I think there's something really intriguing and beautiful about an experience that is an exchange between a musician, a drummer, and a dancer in a classroom, and especially when the musicians are men and the dancers are women. But there's this feminine presence that you're bringing into it that I'd love to hear more about.
Sure. So there are men in my classroom, they just tend to be more women. And that's changing. It's great to see all genders come into the classroom, and however people identify. And all of my drummers aren't men. They just tend to be more male drummers. And I haven't noticed a difference between men or women drummers. I will say Babadana Tunde is one of he's my master drummer. I work with him most. And when we met, he started to explain how he approaches the drum. This is a gifted man. He has been playing for many years. But he started to speak of this drum, and what I got a sense of was the care and the love and respect that he had. He talked about gratitude for being able to play it. It took on such a different meaning, and now I can hear the nuances from one drummer to the next. Every drummer doesn't have this approach, but the ones that I bring into my classrooms do. There's a difference between beating out a beautiful beat and a divine experience they're having with the drum. There's an honoring, they're respectfully evoking out from her what she can deliver to another. So there's a difference between I'm a great drummer. It's like the ego goes away. And it becomes about the drum, not about them.
You mentioned to me earlier about the importance of moving through our emotions and the fact that so much of the work that you're doing really is about helping people express all the different experiences of life, the joy, the sorrow, the ecstasy, and
Indeed,
really deepening into that. And it sounds like that's very connected with the exchange with the drummers.
Yes. In my classes, I do what's called the emotional tour. I call it an emotional tour because we get stuck in no one emotion. I also call it an emotional tour because I believe as humans, we mimic weather. That some days there's sunny, beautiful, bright, shiny days, and then other days there's fog moving in. And then sometimes there's an earthquake or a tsunami. But none of it lasts forever. None of it lasts forever. And I think of our emotions, our feelings as being like weather. So in this tour, we start by moving, and I do it very gradually. It's how does joy sound in your body? How does joy move in your hips or your hands, your feet? How does it sound? It is really important to me to always give emotion sound because so often it's trapped in our throats. So we might smile when we really just want to do a happy dance and a scream of exaltation because we're so excited, but it is contained. It's trying to be in that narrow margin and not be too much. So in my classrooms, I want to see the too much. I welcome your too much. Because this is where we start to exercise that muscle. And I often refer to toddlers. Toddlers don't hold back when they're really excited. They just don't. You just see all this joy. You see it in puppies or not even puppies, just larger dogs. My dog is so happy to see me when I come home. He's wagging everything.
He's not afraid of being too much.
He's not afraid to be too much. He's just too much. And he's amazing. There's no holding back there. And so the drums are supporting each emotion. So the drums are big and joyous. And whether someone can just move an inch or a mile, it's perfect. Whatever movement is for them. And sometimes people are just running around the class dancing or screaming or rolling around on the floor. Whatever it is perfection because it is their expression. But then we move to the next emotion, which is grief. And I don't want to judge. I always say there's no light, dark, good or bad emotion, just emotions that need to be fully expressed. So I don't want to judge the emotions by saying this one is heavy or I want this one, but not that one. We don't get to choose the weather. We just check the forecast.
Yeah.
We don't get to choose that.
Can't avoid any of it. It's going to rain at some point.
Exactly. And what we do when it's going to rain is we get an umbrella. It is my desire that as we acknowledge each emotion, where is it in your body? What brings you grief? And rather than ignore it or try to cover it over or put a fancy bow on it, just acknowledge, I have sadness today. And that's okay. You can have your sadness, or I'm angry. Something has made you angry. How does anger feel in your body? What does it make your body want to do? When that stage of the emotional tour comes up, the drums are angry. They are banging that out because sometimes there's a raging storm, or if you can imagine an earthquake, that physically can happen in weather, and it can happen in our bodies too. Having shame around it or trying to appear fine when you're really not can actually bring on disease. Disease is really what happens from tamping this down, girdling it. So this emotional tour is so important, and the drums just support that. So I could not find music to move with the tenor of the entire classroom and each individual. But so this is why the live drums. And then we move on to confidence. Like, what does it feel like? And just to see people's bodies change when I drop the word into the room.
Confidence.
Confidence. So you know, whereas in joy, you might have just been in your own yellow bubble, which is fantastic. And then in grief, notice people close their eyes. There's many different expressions, but generally speaking, people will move to the floor or lower or still. How the sound from joy to grief changes. And then rage, you'll see balled fists and punching and whatever that person needs for expression, but the drums are supporting this. And this whole experience is really just to make allowances in our everyday life.
Confidence. I know in the Mama Gina interview you did, there was a line of inquiry around our experience as women, how our bodies change, and how we continue to feel confident and alive and engaged and beautiful and powerful as we grow older. And you are such an amazing example of that. I'm 53, and our culture needs so many more illustrations of being powerful and beautiful and sexy as we get older. And you're such an incredible model for that. I don't think you're as old as I am, but
actually, you're wrong.
Really?
We are the same age, sister.
Awesome. Well, yes. So maybe talk a little bit about that, because I know in that interview you were asked, how do we handle aging gracefully? And you said something about being elegant and not dressing like you're 20, but you know what? You dress damn awesomely and super sexy.
Right?
And I think that, honestly, our culture just needs more examples of that. So maybe just say a bit about, adornment and what we wear and how we present ourselves is also such a healing and such a ritual.
It really is. It matters to me what I look like because I've seen the alternative and I'm not going there. I am not doing that. I'm not giving up on me. I will acknowledge where I am now. I'm a grandmother, for God's sakes. My grandkids don't need to see me. I say that my grandkids just...
You go for it. What you're about to say is powerful shit. So you say it. You say it.
I am a badass grandmother, and grandma does not mean, it doesn't mean for me what it has meant some time ago. It's okay to be sexy and a grandma.
Yes.
Now, that said, I'm not 22 anymore, and I'm okay with that. So I'm not trying to hold on to a look that worked for me at 22. That doesn't mean that I'm going to adorn myself in a muumuu and not care about what I look like. I can make 53 look real good. I have a pride about my appearance, and I'm aware of the changes that are going on in my body. I am hot flashing as we speak. In our society, there's a judgment around them, a judgment around getting older. Every time I go to my barber, he's asking me, can we color your hair? My gray bothers him. Mm-hmm. It doesn't bother me. And I tried it once and I felt like I had shoe polish on my head. And that's totally fine for someone else. I have no problem with that. But for me, checking in with what feels good for me. I want to look good. And it's not looking good for other people. It's feeling deep within me what feels good. I feel like an African queen.
You look like an African queen. You do.
That's how I feel. You know, so African queens look a certain way. Mm-hmm. It matters to me that I have pride in the way that I look and move throughout the world. It matters to me that I speak up and give voice to all of who I am.
Yes.
that I don't cower in any way, be that in physical adornment or what I have to say in front of a microphone.
Absolutely. Hear, hear.
Yeah.
So listen, that is incredible. This is the Superpower You podcast, which means that every conversation I have has to touch on what your superpower is. And I usually give a little context while I let people think about it, because I usually haven't prepared them in advance. But for context, my concept of superpower is that special skill, that gift that you have and that you've always had in some form or another your entire life, that has showed up at various ages and stages and in different careers and jobs, and that you might not even necessarily be aware of because it comes so naturally to you that it's like the air you breathe. But to other people, it looks like you're scaling a vertical surface, and they may have said to you, wow, you are really gifted in this particular area. So I'm wondering if there's anything that comes to mind, acknowledging that sometimes it's hard to know our own superpower.
It is. That's, I'm like, oh, a superpower. Okay, here's what I will say. When I look at someone, when I really put my attention on someone, be it in my classroom or friend or someone at Whole Foods, I feel like I know that I am able to sense them on a cellular level. I watch nuances, the way someone articulates their head, the tonality of their voice, such subtle qualities about a person. I begin to feel them. And I know I have this gift of being able to sense and feel. And I'm an alchemist. I'm an alchemist. I am able to get in there, whether I want to. I'm a provocateur on a profound cellular level that helps for transformation.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, there is a superpower in there. I usually sort of figure out how I'm going to articulate it, but there's some rich stuff there. So
Yeah.
Sensing people on a cellular level to notice the nuances in order to support them in transformation.
Indeed.
Amazing.
Indeed.
Beautiful, beautiful. So before we wrap up, could you let my listeners know how they can follow the work that you're doing? I believe you said that you have a freebie, a book that my listeners could download. Yeah. Maybe tell them what's available or just how they can follow you.
Well, they can follow me at livefemme.com. That's livefemme.com. We have a self-care ebook that's a free download, and I'll be sure to have the link that connects them to that. But I'm going to be doing a full-day workshop, Emotion in Motion, and a Femme experience. That's going to be on October 26th and 27th. People can come to one or both of those events. And then there's the Femme teacher training, and that's going to be in Alexandria, Virginia. And that's mid-November, the 16th and 17th. Oh, and on November 4th, I'll be teaching in New York City. But all of this will be available information on the website.
Fantastic. So I'll put all that information in the show notes. And I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I knew I was going to have a blast hearing about your experience and your passion and just how you think about the work that you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Because seeing you physically express is amazing, but I just love to hear people's thinking behind their work too.
This was such a joy. I so appreciate this. I'm so happy to be here.
So that's our interview for today. That's our show for today. Thank you so much for being here. As always, you can find show notes at lisabl.com. The show notes for this episode are lisabl.com/46. So please remember, enter into our 1-year celebration giveaway. All you have to do is write a review on any platform and then send me an email at hey@lisabl.com. You can find information in the show notes or online or on the Facebook page at Superpower You with a U. That's it for now. See you next week. Sending love out to you all.
Thank you for listening to the Superpower You podcast. Please subscribe to the show on iTunes and get more information at lisabl.com.